important if we are to move forward with the job of nation building. In terms of the shares being bought from Fortis, its interest in Belize Electricity Limited, Madam President, the valuation came up to over $62 million. Again, the negotiation of this government was able to bring that down to $18 million. Again, another $44 million discount. Massive. Madam President, I think it's important to highlight that that amounts to roughly $1.56 per share. When the UDP sought to nationalize Fortis's shares, it paid over $2 per share, $2.74 to be exact. And it didn't end there. They sought to litigate their way out of having to pay any compensation. It went all the way up to the CCJ, the highest court in Belize, before a settlement could be arrived at, incurring massive legal costs, saddling our Belizean people with more burdens, Madam President. The last thing that I want to highlight in terms of why it is that we can rest assured that we're getting value for money is the fact that we are bringing this transaction to both chambers within the National Assembly. And we're putting before the Belizean people the bill. We're putting before the Belizean people the agreements which we seek to formalize for all to see that we are a government that holds firm to transparency, Madam President. The last point I want to address is, why is this a good investment? Why is it that it makes sense that we enter into this transaction? Number one, this is an extremely profitable business. The dams, Fortis Belize Limited, generate on an annual basis around $15 to $20 million profits that will now benefit our Belizean people, profits that will be kept within the Belizean economy, that will circulate for the benefit of all of us. The second point I want to highlight is that Fortis Belize Limited holds supply contracts for the supply of electricity up to 2060, so that there are no issues in relation to the supply of energy, in relation to ensuring that we're able to recoup the investment being made on behalf of the Belizean people. The third reason why this is a good investment is because it will help to stabilize the price of energy, Senator Farber, by removing the 1.5% annual escalation clause. The fourth reason why this is a good investment is because this is a safe and high quality asset. You spoke about environmental concerns, Senator Farber. Well, let me tell you this. The dams are operated to international environmental and safety standards, not Belizean standards, international, Senator Farber. Number 5, why is this a good purchase? It ensures that this dam that is critical, electricity is the lifeblood for growth. Without electricity, there's no growth to be had. This keeps it within our hands not any foreign countries, our hands. So we determine our destiny. And I, unlike Senator Farber, have every faith in our Belizean investors, in the board of directors that will now be led by Ambassador Lin Young, and in the CEO, Ms. Kay Menzies. I have every confidence in those individuals and in our Belizeans to man and operate such a critical asset. The last reason why this is such a good investment is because it will open doors for Belizean people. It will ensure that they can invest in such a critical asset and expect a return that will be made available to the public in general, not just the entities mentioned by Senator Farber, but if one is familiar with the Treasury Bills Act, it's clear that it will be made available to the public on a whole, Senator Farber. Identifying key institutions which might take advantage doesn't mean that it ends there, man. You see, the wisdom of this government understands that there is excess liquidity within the banking system that can benefit from investment. There are Belizeans who require their pension on a monthly basis who can benefit from the Social Security, investing in prudent, sound investments that are profitable, Madam President. And so, I rise, Madam President, before closing, to support this bill. This is the Belizeanization of a key asset. And I have no qualms, no reservations in supporting this bill. Thank you.
I recognize Senator Kevin Herrera.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I rise to make my contributions on the Belize Investments Bill 2025. But before I get into my presentation, Madam President, I'd just like to state in reference to some comments made by Senator Farber a little earlier about the profits and some of the issues that may raise in a venture like this. I'd just like to say for the record that profits are extremely important, and there are some things that the private sector does a lot better than the government. And running a utility company in many cases requires innovation, it requires efficiency, it requires a lot of that type of business focus. And nobody does that better than the private sector, Madam President. But there's also a balance to all of this. This is where the Public Utilities Commission comes in, and that regulates rates and makes sure that the profit motive is not driven to the excess where it's affecting consumers. And so I'd just like to raise that point at the outset of my presentation, Madam President, because I think it's an important one. Everybody wants to make sure that consumers are getting the best possible price. And one of the largest consumers of electricity is actually the business community, Madam President. And so it's extremely important as well that businesses get a fair rate, electricity rate, because we have to compete, not only Belize, but we have to compete with businesses abroad. Whether you're looking at the BPO sector or other sectors that have to export products, we have to compete, and that's certainly a cost factor that has to be taken into consideration. Madam President, if I were to summarize the core of this legislation, Madam President, it is that this is a financial bridge. The government is taking on a calculated amount of and a specific amount of debt now to secure the strategic national energy assets, in the form of the dams, with a clear intention of passing their ownership and financial returns to the Belizean public later through a divestment process. The ultimate success of this initiative hinges entirely on the government's ability to execute a successful and high-value public share offering. The important thing is, when we get to that divestment point, Madam President, and I'd like to also state this for record, is that it be publicized properly. It would be very much preferred, and I think the objective is to get as many people as possible to take advantage of this offering and this opportunity when it gets to that point. And so the more that information gets out, the more I think people can prepare to make those types of investments. This bill seeks the authorization to finalize the acquisition of two critical assets from the Fortis companies: 100% of the hydro generation assets held by Fortis Belize Limited, which includes the country's main hydroelectric dams, and then 33.3% of the shares held by Fortis again, or one of the Fortis companies in Belize Electricity Limited. That's the national utility company. These acquisitions carry a combined price tag of around $128 million US dollars, Madam President. 110 million for the hydro dams and 18 million for the BL shares. The financing mechanism approved by this bill is the issuance of treasury bills and treasury notes. These are government debt. For those who don't know, Madam President, the difference between a treasury bill and a treasury note is, among a few other things, but one of the main differences is the term of these debt. Treasury bills are normally for terms shorter than 1 year. Treasury notes are between 2 years and 10 years. And of course, treasury notes carry a higher risk than the treasury bills because they're for a longer period of time. Now, when you look at government debt, generally they are considered safe investments. Madam President, this is an extremely important and strategic initiative by the government to bring these foundational energy assets under local control. I'd like to go through several advantages and perhaps disadvantages of this entire transaction, Madam President. One of the advantages is that it increases the national ownership and control, and so by acquiring these shares, Madam President, the government immediately takes decisive control over critical energy infrastructure. The subsequent planned divestment to the Belizean public is also crucial, as it completes the transition from foreign ownership to broad domestic ownership. This fosters a sense of public investment and ensures that the future dividend flow and decision-making authority remains within our borders. And I think this is I think energy security is always an important thing. We're seeing hints of this during the dry season, when Mexico has to sometimes make a decision between selling to Belize and selling to the Mexican public. So energy security has to be a big policy issue for us right now, Madam President. Bolstering energy security, while the transition doesn't immediately change the physical flow of power, we're not increasing the capacity, the energy capacity with this transaction, Madam President, but what it does is, like I said, it brings domestic ownership to one of the critical energy generation assets in the country into local hands. This enhances our sovereign control over essential energy production and a key component of national security. And another one, Madam President, is that it keeps the foreign exchange from flowing out and keeps it in, so we don't have to be paying these monies to foreign companies anymore, because hopefully they'll be all local ownership. And there are a few disadvantages, Madam President. There's always a risk whenever government is involved, and I know that the whole objective is to divest as quickly as possible. But whenever there's government ownership in these types of companies, Madam President, there's always there's always a risk of excessive political influence. The immediate increase in government control over strategic assets can make the utility prone to political excesses. Decisions regarding rates, employment, and investment should be purely economic and technical, but they may become influenced by political expediency, potentially leading to operational inefficiency and poor investment choices. One of the other ones, Madam President, is loss of a strategic investor, especially with regards to BEL. I know that the preference is always to have local ownership at 100%, but sometimes, especially when you look at larger companies that have access to a lot more technical capacity, Madam President, sometimes it's in our interest to have a minority strategic investor who, even at a minority stake, often to act as a crucial check and balance, forcing a focus on long-term growth, innovation, and serious business competitiveness. This loss could also lead to a gap in the transfer of technical knowledge, because again, a lot of these larger companies have tremendous money to spend on R&D. And then another risk that we run, Madam President, I think this has been said in some of the earlier presentations, but hydro dams are extremely dependent on weather and climatic conditions. And as we know, that the weather has been extremely unpredictable over the years. In fact, there has been a marked decline in the water supply in the upper Makal rivershed watershed area, Madam President, and so there's always that risk that we have with respect to an investment of this nature, especially since it requires it's so dependent on the weather, and of course, like I mentioned, the weather is so unpredictable at this time. And then there's also the concentrated risk of one customer, Madam President. The hydro assets' primary and virtually sole customer is BEL. This creates a single customer risk for the acquired assets, simply because BEL has been going through significant cash flow issues over the past couple of years, cash flow challenges. And so while the companies will be able to sell energy to BEL, sometimes deals will have to be done on a credit basis, because perhaps sometimes the cash flow might not be there. And so that also presents a risk, especially in cases where perhaps the utility company needs to raise rates, and we saw this in the rate stabilization arrangements that were made some years ago, Madam President, where this was just deferred to a future time, even though the company had significant need for that cash at that given time. And so these are all risks that are playing in, and these are certainly things that have to be taken into account as we continue the conversation with the acquisition of these assets. But the important thing, Madam President, is we're looking at energy independence, and I think that part we cannot stray from, and so there are things that we have to do along the way that we'll just have to do. So even with these valid risks, I do believe this is a necessary and good strategic move, Madam President, by the government to bring key assets home. However, what the government does after the acquisition and the subsequent divestment will be even more important than this initial stage. The quest for genuine energy dependence remains unfinished. We still have continued foreign dependence, Madam President. Over 50% of our energy is imported from Mexico. This is a supplier that has its own growing supply problems. It's also very obvious, and rightly so. They have to take care of their people first. We are not their priority. And so, with 50% of our dependency on a foreign supplier, Madam President, it does bring out some vulnerability in this country. And it's something that I've spoken before in the Senate, and I'll say it again, it's extremely important that we address those issues in the most urgent possible manner. There's also the cost impediment, Madam President. This reliance on imported energy is extremely expensive. I know again, going back to Senator Faber's earlier presentation about the cost of the energy from the hydro dams and the need to keep profits at a minimum. But one of the most expensive options we have at certain key times when we need it most is the supply from Mexico. Sometimes we have to pay as much as $1 per kilowatt for electricity compared to the 12.7 cents US that we're paying to the hydro dams. This acquisition, Madam President, that we're looking at today does nothing to resolve that underlying dependence from Mexico and the cost implications, and the cost impediments, and the cost implications that come with the supply from Mexico. Madam President, the government needs to articulate a much clearer, more aggressive policy on the development of new renewable energy generation. Belize has significant solar resources.
Could you hold 1 moment for me, Senator? Clerk, are we getting a feedback from somewhere? Could you see to that for me? Could you just hold a few minutes, though?
I'm getting to listen to my presentation in real time, Madam President.
The clerk has gone, Senator Wade. I'm hearing you twice, Senator Herrera.
Thank you, Madam President. As stated, Madam President, the government needs to articulate a much clearer and more aggressive policy on the development of new renewable energy generation. Like I said, Belize has significant solar resources, unrealized in many respects because our solar industry is so small. And so if we can develop that more, Madam President, it will certainly bring us much closer to energy independence. And I'll give an example in terms from a cost standpoint. We're paying 210 million Belize dollars for basically 51 megawatt capacity of hydro generation. That, Madam President, comes up to about 4.1 million Belize dollars per megawatt. And that's basically what we're paying for the hydro for the hydro capacity that we're purchasing right now. It costs around $2.2 million to invest in a 1 megawatt solar capacity right now on the current market, and that cost continues to go down. And so when you look at it from that standpoint, and this does not take that would not have included, Madam President, the solar storage, but I was talking about just the solar generation aspect of it. That, Madam President, is, if you look at what we're purchasing for the hydro, is almost twice the cost of what we could have done it if we had invested in the solar part of it. Now, I'm not, like I said, I'm not against the purchase I'm not against the acquisition of the hydro dams, Madam President. I just wanted to make that point that solar has moved very, very, very far. The prices continue to go down, and Belize has tremendous solar resources that have not been tapped to any significant extent. And so I'm hoping, Madam President, that as we continue down this road, that the government continues to push for energy dependence, continue to push especially on renewable energy generation, and continue to set the policies in place to attract local investments in these areas. I do believe, and I've had many conversations about this over the past, but it does, a lot of times when you're going into these conversations about the potential to invest in solar, there's a lot of unrealistic things that are put in front of you that, to me, discourages investors from going more aggressively into the sector. And so, Madam President, I support this bill, but I urge this government to immediately follow this financial bridge with a policy bridge that delivers true energy independence for all Belizeans. Thank you.
I recognize Senator Glenfield Dennison.
Thank you, Madam President. I want to start my presentation by putting on my glasses and then saying a big hello to the 48 employees of Fortis who would be able to now unionize. Guys, we welcome you to unionism. Congratulations. The Belize Energy Workers Union is ready to have you. Please phone in and let's start the discussion. No, I can't. That's a wide idea. So, Fish from River Bottom tell me that Fortis is one of the most anti-union employers this country has. So those people are not a part of a union. Be careful, because they might say, like what today I said that who they tell me thing. But all fun and jokes aside, the main question that we need to answer here is, what is value for these dams? Let's be very clear. What is value for what we are purchasing? In order to derive that, we need to ask the question of how is value derived? My colleague from the chamber was very clear about the cost of production of facilities, hydro facilities, now brand new dams, and the rates that are currently available for us to build these dams, so I won't go over that, except to say that point is well made, including the discussion in relation to the cost of saving the power and storing the power. Senator Hira, I thank you for making that. You took out about 10 minutes out of my presentation. No, I hear you too. So let's have a sober discussion about what the valuation was. We used the discount cash flow method. Okay, fine, but their cash flow is derived from our water source. We already had the capital investment in the dams, and so that is what we're purchasing. 3 dams. This is a dam deal, right? We're going to buy 3 dams for 112 million. We're going to call it the dam deal. And so the reports that are provided only gives us a very topical review on what the assessments of the dams are. I would have liked to read the entire report, because when you're dealing with a depreciating asset, the question in my mind comes to where exactly we're at in relation to the value of the asset that we're purchasing. So, for example, Moyohon would have been valued at $1 back to the people of Belize after the life of the dam. That's in the agreement. We're at 30 years into that life of the dam, so at some point it would be worth $1 to the people of Belize. So I want to know whether we were paying for the value of that asset with that depreciation in mind. And I understand that in relation to Vaca and Chileo, that would be the value, the market value of those dams, fine. But I don't know what is the value of the infrastructure, because the infrastructure is the main thing that we're buying. And I'm told they're well-built dams. And so that is not in question. I'm told that the hydroelectric facilities in there are maintained, so that is not in question. But what we have to be certain about, you afraid to say it, Senator Herrera, but you could step on my toes. Public sector management of an asset needs to be monitored very carefully, because in this case the maintenance of the dam is key, and we cannot be afraid to spend money on maintaining the dam in a method that ensures the longevity of our investment and the return on that investment within the medium to long term. Senator Faber, I hear you, and I align with you insofar as the discussion as it relates to transparency and accountability. And I commend the leader of government business for his showing of what could be perceived as a conflict. I know Courtney Coy is a large firm, and so the Chinese wall, I'm sure, is intact, my friend. So, and I give you too much flack for that, leader of government business. But it was a curious thing that it was only raised here, like, because I was wondering why we're buying this down. So let's get back to business. I had a similar question, Senator Faber, in relation to why Fortis, who is a company with great knowledge, and that's their entire business model in Belize, of generating power and selling it, is now getting out of that business in Belize, and we, who know nothing about it, are getting into it. That's a serious question that I had. And so I started to look at what we as a country have said about our prospects for rain, because this comes down to hydro is a fancy word, but end of the day this comes down to the water and the use of that water resource along the river. So our forecast for rainfall is slated to decline. So we have to appreciate that in our forecasting, the generating power of these assets will decline in relation to the access that we will have to water. So, we get a discount for that? Is my question. Because while I don't understand climate change, the government is very clear that it will affect our water supplies. We did have in the report the discussion on sedimentation and the use of the cranes to open the spillways. So it will be crucial that we ensure that we address those issues urgently. And we tie, like my friend has said, the policy in how we are going to move forward with the operationalizing of the takeover of these dams in a strategic way. Now, I'm happy when technocrats are doing what technocrats are supposed to do, so I commend the government for securing Ambassador Lin Yong and his expertise in relation to the bringing him into the public service, if I can say that. But the Belizean people need to know what we're getting. So, Belizean people, I'm speaking to you. The Belize Electricity Investment Bill does a few things. One, it validates the government's authority to do what we're here saying we're going to do. The main aspects is to enter into the share purchase agreements with Fortis Belize and for the purchase of the dam and for the purchase of the shares. That's what this bill is intended to do. One of the spin-off effects that's in the bill is that we require the amendment in the Treasury bill to take up the amount of so that we can meet the obligations that the government will have. We're taking up the value of Treasury bills and Treasury notes that the government can float. For people out there, it's how much money we can print. It's limited. So now we are taking it up from 4 million to 400 million to 600 million for bills, and from 1,200 million for notes to 1,600 million. So a $400 million increase that we're doing there. Now, what is the benefit of this? My friend leader for government business, and I'm sure my friend Senator Koi will say, we are saving on foreign exchange that has to go up. That is, in and of itself, a commendable aspect, because our foreign exchange going out positively affects our financial position as a country in the long run. The question of how it affects the short run, I will leave for my friend Senator Koi to explain. Now, this money, as we start now, is going to be paid out of by the Financial Secretary to from the Consolidated Revenue Fund for the purchase price that is in the share purchase agreement. And the Financial Secretary is authorized to issue the Treasury notes. Other than that, the important aspects of what we're doing here are laid out in the share purchase agreements. So, people of Belize, pay attention. In relation to BL, we're buying $8 million of FBL shares for $112 million, payable in cash at closing, 15th of November, the latest. Which explains why we are here today on such short notice, because it's time sensitive. Which one I covered just now? The shares for Fortis, good. The shares for BL, all 22,984,662 ordinary shares in BL is being sold for the rock bottom price of $18 million. Again, payable in cash and closing, with dispute resolution mechanisms to be done by arbitration and seated in Miami for both agreements. Again, closed subject to parliamentary approval and to be closed before the 15th of November, otherwise the agreement is terminated. If I say anything wrong, correct me, Senator Koi. So, it is an upfronting of the cash, and the country expects to gain that revenue back over time. So we can't dispute that. Owning our dams is a good thing. Controlling and having better control of our energy stability is undisputedly a good thing. See, last week I had a book here, Confessions of an Economic Hitman. Personally, Adam Moore was never in this position in the first place. But I respect that we need foreign investments, and we needed it at the time to bring such a large foreign investment to build our dams. So I want to start looking at building more dams. I want us to start looking at other ways in which we can secure our energy resources. I don't want this to happen again, because a lot of fuss can be made about whether we're getting value for money and so, right? Whether we should just tell Fortis, yeah, where to go on. This is where the dams then work. Hold ya. Go on the business. Or we are using the cash flows and discount it. But what can't be disputed, I like the language my friend Senator Guerra used. It sounds very poetic. I can't repeat it, but energy is the life of this country. And without it, we're going to be not up the Moyahon Creek, but another one. We are going we're now in the rainy season. But when we get into the dry season, and we are unable to produce electricity from the same dams that we're buying, we will be forced to purchase electricity at a rate well above what the Belizean consumers are paying for electricity. And that is unsustainable. It's simply unsustainable. So let's, as a country, pause and use this incredible moment in our history to secure our energy future, not only in dams, but let's explore the other possibilities. Because only being able to produce half of the energy that we need as a country is not a position we should be boasting about. And we don't commend the purchase of the dams, right? Because no one is saying I never commend the purchase of the dams. I commended it, Madam President, right? But as a country, we have to seriously look at how we are going to bridge the gap with CFE. They're our friends and so, but even they have constraints in their energy production and demands because they're suffering from the same ravages of climate change just like us. So as a country, I think it's time that we start to take a hard look at how we will start to meet the energy demands of Belizeans. Now, I hear you with the waivers, Senator Faber. I align with it. I won't repeat it. The sovereign waivers and so, excellent points made. The risks that are tied to the possibility of arbitration or so can't be understated. It seems that there will be a clean break. So, provided we can pay, I don't know that there will be that much litigation that can come. And we have the mechanisms in the bill to pay. And the Fortis did give undertakings that there are no other litigation and so tied into the purchase. They own it free and clear. They never got it at a pawn shop. They could sell it away and we can buy it, and I'm sure their attorneys would have advised them properly if it were otherwise. Senator, stop following me. Put in a lead plug for the firm. So, I can't miss this point. Because when good happens, you have to commend good. Built into the agreement that Fortis has is a provision, because some we use big terms here and Belizean people don't understand it, right? It's a provision where Fortis gets to automatically increase the cost that they sell power to Belize for. That cost is not tied to their operation of the dams. It is simply a mechanism that they had in place to secure an increase in the rate. So doing away with such a provision is a commendable thing, and I must commend it, because that is how you stop the hemorrhaging, if it were. Now, stopping the hemorrhaging doesn't mean that we must stop there. We must assess, see if we got diabetes. We must assess, see if we got high blood pressure, and check whether there were any other inflationary, be careful, whether the costs that were being projected and passed on from Fortis are normal. Whether we can cut any of those expenses, not the maintenance, no, please, no, say, I say cut the maintenance, can we cut that out, and damn, they broke, there ain't a problem, not the maintenance. But whether or not there was any hyperinflation of any of the rates in which we were selling to BCOL, it's a good time to look at that to see that we can get the rates. I have to say it, we like a government business. People want lower light bill, right? My members want lower light bill. Well, that they didn't get. Last year I didn't get. So that the common sense explanation of the escalator clause, and I thought it's important that we address it to Belizeans so that they understand, because that's what, if I misspeak, somebody correct me or no, but that's what it comes down to. Because that rate is set there, Belizeans have to pay more every year for the cost of electricity, right? So the doing away with that is a very commendable thing. Now, from a union perspective, I have to ask in this honorable house to ensure that the tenure, the security of the employees that have given their life to Fortis, and it's not just to Fortis, it is to the people of Belize that they were giving their service to. Their expertise were developed in country, and I am proud when I got the report that is 100% Belizean people, talented people on the ground running the operations at Fortis. 100%, Madam President. Huh? And I hear you. Yeah, talented. I put it in afterwards. I catch myself. No, they're very technically trained. They are experts in OSH. We have to talk about OSH, but another time. But they're very to the international standard. They are very much aware of the. And I'll bring it up, Madam President. I'll have to touch your mic. They're very aware of what needs to go into safety of the dams. They're very aware of the engineering, the civil engineering works that are required, and so I commend them, and I want to make sure that we can get a commitment from the government that those people, their service will not just be done away with. We will honor whatever pension requirements that are there. We're not going to try to pay them out and start them people over. Some of them people have age where they can't afford to start over, so that they can enjoy their retirement in a dignified manner after having served the country. They never had no business over whom owned the country, or whether I don't want to say neo-colonialism and neoliberalism, but whether that was involved in how they became employed in Belize. But the assets are in Belize. They've been maintaining assets that are Belizean and will now be in the ownership of Belize. So I want to big up them people. Commend yourself, guys. We expect from you the same or better level of professionalism and work that you have done in the private sector. And I want to caution that if we see we start politicize the appointments of employees into your company, call me. Because we can't allow the damn deal to fail. Because both political parties would find it too tempting to resist to appoint people who are not of the caliber with the technical expertise that is needed. So no call me if that happens. I don't think it happen, right? You don't have government business. But there is a risk, and people out there feel a genuine fear that that can happen. And so that is one aspect that we need to ensure that the politics stays out of. What the company, you know? Hydro-Belize. No. Miley 2 cents now. Nobody asked me this. But this is how I see this damn deal. $9 million the last BL last year, right? The 9? Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. Climate change is becoming real, and the dams will not be producing at the level that Fortis is expecting. I think this is a bait and switch. I think Fortis wanted to get out of BL, saw that it was over-regulated, and decided, yeah, we're going. That not make dollars, so that not make no sense. No, I hear you. I give you my 2 cents. Dangle the sale of the dams and say, when I sell the dams, not about BL, when I keep that. Got people interested in purchasing the dams because they're very profitable, and then tacked the purchase of BL to the purchase of the dams. Because who else would buy shares, 22 million plus shares in BL, other than somebody with a vested interest in BL, like the majority shareholder? So it really is a clean break for Fortis. Get out of BL, get out of dams, get out of Belize, cash out at the discounted cash value instead of their asset-based approach. Because we hear about the discount on BL. That is touted. But this is a company with a lot of thinking people. So you just not discount the value of those shares arbitrarily. This is no brilliant negotiation. Let's be clear. I'm not gonna be unkind. The negotiations were very fruitful for the people of Belize. But in an arm's length transaction, Fortis done a kono mono. So they know exactly why they reduced the value of the shares. Kono mono. Remember I talked to my Belizean people. So, I don't want it in English. Kind of think we need it in English, but
Senator, just proceed with your presentation.
Thank you, Madam President. So, other than us reading out Fortis's press release, well, government and Fortis's press release, we ought to ask these questions. We ought to ensure that Belizeans are getting always the best deal possible under the sun. And whether or not looking at solar, looking at alternative methods of energy production is not a part of the discussion we should be having now. Madam President, how do we try to mitigate some of the difficulties that may come? Well, we could pay the people in more, the staff, but that's not always the answer. What is important is that we retain them, that we understand that they have been running the dams, that their expertise is second to none in relation to those dams. And one thing I could tell you about private sector, they will fire you fast. So I think we can take it for granted that the technical expertise that are there when we started to look at this deal need to be retained, and we must add technical expertise to ensure that we are getting the best people in there to have a vision for Belize's energy sector. And this is not only Hydro Belize, but BL. So the board appointments that are now going to be available, I want to see highly technical, highly skilled persons appointed to replace the caliber of directors that were there before. And please not tell me we don't have them in Belize. Instead of a politicization of those appointments, we need to ensure, like we did in this one, by sharing the executive summaries, that transparency continues to be at the forefront of how we run those operations, because a spoonful of sugar make the medicine go down when you have to tell the Belizean people that the rates have to go up. So if it is the Belizean people understand what all is going into the cost of energy, perhaps they need more cartoon videos on Channel 7 and 5 and Plus TV during the news, so that Plus TV, let's not forget Plus TV, so that no, like on a serious note, so that Belizean people understand that there's a lot that goes into the cost of power. And be real now, most of us have lived abroad. If you've had the pleasure of living in the Caribbean, especially, you understand we got a good electricity company now. Make you know, listen, rolling blackouts, that one thing I just start here about when the dams then start go dry. But by and large, even with the oil money that Guyana, current go off like, okay. The idea to get a text message that you can get power failure on Sunday between the hours of 2 o'clock and 5 o'clock. The one thing you don't know about the Caribbean, you know. BL is operating at a standard that is exceptional, and I commend them. We got good people around the place. And it's not only comparing it to the Caribbean, but I have to make the comparison. You see that leaning lamppost you talk about, Senator Faber? Sometimes they have to drop before BL can fix it, you know. And it takes a good 2 weeks after it drop, if nobody not get shocked up before they can fix it. We have to fix that. We have to ensure that we run our transmission and distribution system so that, like the gold standard that we have when hurricane, where we complain about 2 days and 3 days after we not got current. You talk about 2 and 3 weeks or months in some of the other Caribbean countries, you know. BL they run a good show. So we have to keep it up. We have to ensure that the leadership team that we put there raises the bar. Leader for government business. We want to raise the bar on what BL has been doing because they've been doing a good job, but the people of Belize deserve the best. I know the lobby fee rate increased on Senator Faber. But the cost of power is what the cost of power is, unless in a situation where we don't plan ahead to ensure that it can come down. Now, I'm sure BL will have had on their records independent financial and technical audits. But this is a good time to pause and relook at those. See how we can assess them and ensure that we build a BL that is unwaning Hydro Belize, that is best suited for purpose, and we tie it with an energy plan that will see the people of Belize be energy sufficient by a designated timeline in the future. I thank you, Madam President.
Mr. Vice President, in accordance with Standing Order 10-8, I move that the proceedings on the order paper be entered upon and proceeded with at this day's sitting at any hour, though opposed.
Honorable members, the question is that the proceedings on the order paper may be entered upon and proceeded with at this day's sitting at any hour, though opposed. All those in favor kindly say aye. Those against kindly say no. I think the ayes have it. I recognize Senator Louis Wade.
Mr. President, good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak briefly on this most important bill. I could recall many years ago, I went to PG and my tire got punctured and I had to get it repaired, so I pulled off the road and I went to a small tire repair shop. And while I was waiting for them to repair, there was a sign on the wall that said you can get things cheap and of good quality, but you can't get it fast. Or if you get it expensive, it will be of good quality. And it just kept saying you can get 2 out of the 3, but you can't get all 3. And when we think about energy security for Belize, I think that's really where we are. This purchase is not a cheap one. It is an expensive purchase for the people of Belize. But I believe that it is a necessary one. And I rise on the matter because what the people really want on the street is affordable energy. It is reduced prices in electricity. And so we could have, yes, we could have a lot of discussion on the benefits of bringing the dam to a place where it will be under Belizean ownership and that we can have national pride because the rivers are now freed up and back in Belizean hands. And I think that that is something great. But at the end of the day, the electricity rates in the country of Belize are among the highest in the region. Only El Salvador has more expensive electricity per kilowatt hour than Belize. And where is the cheapest one? Mexico. Continues to offer to its people electricity at half the price of what Belize is selling to its people. And so when I first heard about the sale that Fortis was interested in selling, I felt first that it would have been best carried by another international investor. That was my first thoughts. Make no goose fool you, dams are expensive, and it might be affordable because we can find the funds domestically, but it does not change the fact that this is an expensive venture. I was not for dams in the country of Belize when the debate started decades ago, because the claim was that it would have provided cheaper, cleaner electricity for the country of Belize. That was a lie, and it still is. Dams are not clean. They are dirty in a different way. They are dirty in a different way. And so at that time, I did not support dams. And then to claim that an alternative energy, because that's what a dam is. A dam is an alternative form of energy, and all forms of alternate sources of energy are expensive. I just looked at a news piece from 2005 that on the day that BEL CEO Lin Young broke the open Chaleo Dam, at the very inauguration ceremony, he announced that BEL was asking the PUC to grant a 13.8% increase on the day they were inaugurating the dam. Dam is not cheap energy, and then you have it controlled 100% by a foreign entity that, yes, wants to recoup its investment as fast as possible, get the best out of it as long as they can, and when they begin to see that they cannot have their way, will pull out as fast as possible. I never supported dams for Belize. It was a lie. And the proof is now here, because we continue to have the most expensive rates in the country. Why? Because that little sign waved down the PG with upon the wall is still true. You cannot have both clean and cheap energy. You will have one or the other. There's a difference between cheap and cheaper. There's a difference between cheap and cheaper. You see? So solar is getting cheaper and alternative energy is getting cheaper, but it is still not cheap. Because cheap fuel, cheap energy is not clean. And I appreciate the attempts by our country to try to hit the highest shelf when it comes to clean energy. I appreciate it because it shows that we as a country, we love our environment, we care for our environment, and that we don't just want to see a clean country, we want to see a clean world. And I support that fully, but it comes at a cost. And this is the cost. This is the cost. And so I'm standing up because Belizeans still want cheaper energy, and they should get it. Because the largest countries that are far ahead of us, countries like Germany, they are starting up their nuclear reactors again. Are we aware of that? That there are countries that have pushed alternative energy, and we need to continue to push our scientists to reduce the cost of alternative energy. But my friends, at the end of the day, the energies that Belize is spending its money on are the most expensive forms of energy that exist, and we must balance it with cheaper forms. And so I have to tell the people of Belize, number one, yes, we need to have national pride that this great resource is coming back into Belizean hands. But you know what? Buy some shares in a Fortis. When the government begins to sell shares, buy some shares. There are two ways that we as Belizeans can own this asset. One is if the government buy it. But number two is if we as Belizeans invest in this asset of Fortis. That's one way you can get cheaper energy for yourself, because you will be getting some dividends. You'll be getting some dividends. And I am a person who don't believe that government will own everything. That's why in the first instance, I was hoping that a foreign investor could come in. But I think it is, in listening to the discussions held between Friday and now, I think it is a good thing that the government has put the money in and then says, hey, but we are going to resell some of these shares, so that it is national, but it is not totally on the government. And then, of course, maybe foreign investors will come in a little bit later, but it won't be 100%. And so I want to rally Belizeans to say, let's also help to take it out of government hands and put it into private hands without putting it into international investors' hands, so that we as Belizeans who can invest in Fortis can make some money off it, just like the foreigners were making money off it. That's one way that for those who invest in it, the cost of your energy will go down. But here is the thing, guys, that half of the year it's going to rain and that dam is going to do well. But the next half of the year, I want to join my colleague in saying, let's get those solar panels up as fast as possible, so that we are prepared for both drought and we are prepared for the excessive rainfall that is going to come. But the question on the street, I believe, still has to be answered, because the Belizean people will say, well, what's in it for me? I have said, number one, go buy shares when the shares are sold. That is something that you will be able to have some tangible benefit from. But number two, I want to say to the government, we need to continue to diversify our energy needs. And if the big countries can be looking again at restarting some of their cheap energy sources, I believe we as a smaller country must be able to do so too, but with keeping the same frame of reference. of environmental friendliness. I want us to not throw away our environmentally friendly approach to energy. But we have to bite the bullet, because the people on the street appreciate the fact that it's coming back into Belizean hands, but they're still asking the question, when will it be cheaper? When will it be more affordable? And I will close with this. I have to cuss myself out whenever I turn on me AC. I don't mean cuss like cuss. I've managed to come through this speech without saying the damn. But it is so expensive in this country to do the business that I do of television and just getting through the hot season without burning a massive hole in the wallet. And I believe that every Belizean deserves a little bit of air conditioning. Do you see the kinds of houses that are being built today? They're made out of tin. And some don't have the proper insulation. And even with the proper insulation, the heat. No wonder all of the picnic and the play outside and the outside on the street. They can't even stay in the house where it is so hot. And air conditioning should really be a human right in today's changing temperature. And you know where it can't be done? Belize. Because if I have to think 2 or 3 times to put on air conditioning in my home when it is scorching outside, how about the average Belizean? As we conclude this deal, as we wrap up on this bill, and I'm going to vote for it, it does not solve the greater issue at hand, which I want this government to address. We want cheaper electricity. Thank you very much.
I recognize Senator Arana.
Good morning. It's almost 12. Still man in 2 more minutes. Good morning, Mr. President. I rise in support of the Belize Electricity Investment Bill. This bill has my full support because of the principles that lie with it and that it highlights. And after careful looking at the details and the negotiations that went with this type of investment, I have seen that it addressed the necessity, a necessity that is more shared by all Belizeans: electricity. People want cheaper electricity. And with this comes the cost of effectiveness. And I also look at how it underscores the need where security needs to be set in place. We must not be misled, but this bill has a sound legal framework. It addresses the need for greater independence for Belize, and Belizeans are going to be the ones to own this form of electricity. And so, if you look at it, a lot have shared their views on climate change. It is a renewable energy that we're looking at, which is going to be good for climate change. And if we go into the technicalities, of which I'm not going to go too far, but looking at the emissions, renewable energy is good. And if we look at weather patterns today, or for the past couple of years, and you track it back, let's go back like 3, 4, 5 years. Rains are no longer half of the year. In fact, when you look at June to November, the rain is no longer June to November. Rain starts as early as May, first week of May. And rain go as far now as mid-February. So the dry season has become shorter. And so with this, I look at the electricity production, which will be very good for this country. And most of all, Mr. President, I must highlight again that it is noteworthy that it provides for substantial costs, savings. Once again, I support this bill. Thank you.
I recognize Senator Galvez.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise today in full support of the Belize Electricity Investment Bill 2025, a bill that embodies bold, strategic action that once again reaffirms this government's commitment to energy independence. With this bill, we are ensuring that the power that lights our homes, runs our schools, fuels our industries, and sustains our communities will be owned, managed, and controlled by Belizeans for Belizeans. And as we know, others have mentioned before, this bill authorizes the government to undertake 2 transactions: the purchase of 100% of the shares of Fortis Belize Limited and the purchase of Fortis 33.3% shareholdings in Belize Electricity Limited. Together, these acquisitions present an enormous win for Belize, as it places over 1/3 of Belize's electricity generation and control of our national utility company under Belizean ownership. Still, some have questioned why now, why the urgency? And Senator Faber mentioned that it's not a necessary purchase. But Mr. President, the answer is clear and transparent. Fortis is divesting its Caribbean portfolio. So they're not just selling their assets in Belize, because just last month they finalized the sale of their plant in Turks and Caicos